Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Too Opinionated. We're pretty excited today talking with actor, singer Michael Cerveris. So, welcome, Michael.
Hey, glad to be here.
So, let me tell you before we get started, let me tell you the best part of having you on the show. So, I didn't even know. I didn't.
Very
I was a huge fan of yours. Just got that. I was a huge fan of yours, but I had no idea that you grew up in Huntington.
yeah. I'm proud son of West Virginia.
Yeah, I mean that was just like the cherry on top. That was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I got home more than I do, but in the past few
Yeah.
years, I've been able to come back more to Huntington and throughout West Virginia. And I've kind of looked for every opportunity to do that. I brought the band through for a little West Virginia tour around Labor
You
Day.
did Mountain Stage, right?
Mountain Stage a couple times, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, and also I've been filming a lot the past couple of years in Pittsburgh, so right on the edge of West Virginia, and that makes it a lot easier to come down and visit.
Yeah, but you're a Mountaineer fan though, right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. None of this pit stuff.
Well, I mean, truth be told, it's more of a Thundering Herd fan, but
Well,
the
that's
rare
okay
occasion
too.
they ever play each other, so.
Well, yeah, we could talk for a while about why we should be playing each other, but
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, I'm a Marshall graduate. I've always been a WVU
Oh,
fan,
yeah.
but I'm a Marshall graduate. You can do both.
But
You can support both teams.
you can have dual passports.
Yeah, none of my fellow alumni believe that, but it
Right.
is possible. I mean,
I'm with
especially
you.
we don't play each other.
I know it's we need to stick together as much as possible,
That's right.
basically.
It's a small state. We have our difficulties. We got to support each other.
Yeah, I mean, we all we already divided once. We don't need to divide again over
That's
over.
right. That's right. Now I know you're a Yale graduate, but were you at least somewhat excited that Marshall won the soccer championship?
Oh man, I was thrilled. I'm
Yeah.
always following martial
Yeah.
sports and stuff. So yeah, that was
Yeah.
thrilling.
That's pretty good. So were you? I guess you were in Huntington not too long after the plane crash.
We were there then. We had
Yeah.
I my dad started teaching at Marshall in 1969. So yeah, no, I remember the night of the plane crash really well. My dad and mom were out at the movies. It was their anniversary, so they were out at the movies at the Keith
Wow.
Albee on that night. And the scene in the movie that people might remember when they come on stage and announce to everybody at the Keith Albee that night that there'd been
Yeah.
this plane crash. They were there when that happened. So I remember it
That's
real.
amazing. There's
Yeah,
no if you're from this area, especially if you've been around long enough to have been alive when that happened, I mean, you can't get away from it.
no,
It becomes such a part of you. And I know when I was on campus, um, it's they do a really good job kind of keeping that memory alive. You've
yeah,
got the fountain there, and it's just
yeah,
it even if you're not from here, by the time you leave Marshall, you definitely get it.
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's a beautiful thing to come out of a terrible event like that. That it really brought the community together in a deep and lasting way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and even then, I mean, it got downplayed a little bit, but Bobby Bowden was at West Virginia, and he was very instrumental in getting that football team restarted
Yeah.
with that. So yeah, kind of crazy. Have you? I'm switching gears, but have you got to play at Keith Albee?
Yeah. Well, one of the Mountain Stage performances, the first time was in conjunction with the Martial Artist Series anniversary. So I got to play
Oh, that's
uh,
great.
on that stage with Arlo Guthrie and a bunch of other folks that night. And yeah, that was a huge thrill because I had worked there as a kid. I worked at National Record Mart for a long time,
Yeah,
and then I worked at the Keith Albee and the Cinema and Camelot movie theaters.
they're all
And
right there.
Yeah, and I did everything because it wasn't a union house, so I learned. I popped popcorn, I took tickets, and I even got to take the film canisters when they would come in, and I was taught how to splice the reels together and thread them through the machine and run the projector and stuff. So I got to do everything, and that was a real thrill, especially for like a movie buff like me. And
Yeah.
it meant that I could do things like it was one of the summers was when the first Aliens movie came out.
Yeah.
And so, I got to watch that, I don't know how many times, or The Shining. I would go in and watch my favorite parts of The Shining, enough that I would start to see things like when Shelley Duvall hits him over the head with the baseball bat. And obviously, they changed out the bat for a rubber bat at the last minute, because if you watch it as many times as I did, you can see the bat like bend over his head.
Oh, you were catching the stuff.
Yeah, yeah. So it was an ideal job for a kid like me.
Yeah, I love that. I dated a girl when I was in college that worked at the Huntington Mall cinemas.
Oh yeah.
And it was the best because I was there. I saw every movie. I'd go in late, and go to the 9 o'clock showing and just wait for her to get finished. I saw everything coming out. It was the best.
Yeah. You're like, no, I'll give you a ride.
Yeah. I was like, yeah, no problem. Well, back then they would allow you, they'd give you passes. Like if you were dating or married to someone working at a theater, they would let you have as many passes as you would want. And they'd even give you popcorn and soda. You couldn't get the candy, but so I was, as a college student, I was like, I can't get any better than this.
Yeah. I remember one of my favorite memories was we used to pop the popcorn for all three of the theaters in the basement of the Keith Albee on Wednesdays. And so there was like a crew of us that would go down, and we would just sit there and listen to music and get hopped up on soda and just pop popcorn for hours and put it in these big yellow bags. And then we put the bags over, and they would store them at the other theaters, and then they would bring them out and dump them into the warmers. So, I knew that the best time to get popcorn was on like Thursday. By the weekend or by Tuesday, it had been popped, for a week. So
yeah, that's pretty great. That's pretty great. I think the last time I was at Keith Albee, we went and saw a rendition of Chicago there. But I think the last time I was there, Frankie Valli was there.
Oh wow, yeah.
And it hadn't been too long ago. I mean, it's been a little while, but
yeah,
he's still sounding pretty good.
Yeah. No, I saw a lot of my first Broadway national touring shows that I ever saw were like Jesus Christ Superstar when I came through the Keith Albee and the ballet and symphonies and stuff. I mean, Martial Artist Series did and does amazing stuff, bringing world-class culture to Huntington through.
They really do
through the Keith Albee. So,
and Keith Albee is such a beautiful theater. I mean, the seats are literally 4 inches, apart, the rows, so you have no room. Yeah, but it's beautiful. I mean, it's just beautiful.
Yeah,
yeah. Where did
they had built those other? For a while, they had to kind of cut up into other little theaters. Yeah. There's little theaters on the balcony, but they took all that out and restored it, and it's just beautiful now.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, it's so nice. Where'd you go to school in Huntington?
Well, I went to Gallier Elementary, and then Gallagher Elementary, and then Beverly Hills Junior High School, which doesn't really exist in the same form anymore. Right. And Gallagher is gone altogether, I think.
Where do we get a Beverly Hills High School in West Virginia? Where did we get Beverly Hills?
Where'd that name come from?
Yeah,
I don't know. We were the
it
Beverly
seems
Hills
strange for this area.
Yeah, we were the Beverly Hills Blackhawks, and then I went to Huntington East for a couple years of high school, and then went away for my last 2 years of high school and college and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty great. I was so thrilled because we try so hard to get actors and musicians from West Virginia on the show, and we've been lucky enough to have a bunch. Although I've been, pleading with everybody I know for Jennifer Garner, and nothing yet.
Oh, really?
Like, come on, Jennifer, come to the show.
We'll give her a call.
Well, that's what I know. That's exactly it. Because you can, we've done this enough. My son and I do this. He used to do the interviews with me, but now he decided he'd rather be behind the camera. So he does the editing and all the hard stuff. He lets me do the easy stuff. Right. But we normally, just like we did with you, we'll contact your people and try to give them our little spiel, and a lot of times we're lucky enough to get to talk to them. But then you run into some where you just know they didn't ask.
Yeah,
they're just there as the wall. They didn't ask, and that's kind of the feeling I'm getting. I'm going to have to, find somebody that knows, back her mother channels. Or somebody. Yeah, back channels. I'm going to have to go back channels. Yeah. She probably knows. She's probably like, please don't put me on that show.
If you've watched her Instagram, she seems kind of game for pretty much anything.
She does. So. She's so nice. So yeah. So we're still working on that. But we've been lucky enough to have a lot of actors that have at some point lived in West Virginia. So that was such a thrill when I found that you were here.
It was a thrill for me too when my agents passed the information along, because I get these requests and often have no connection to the people or the place.
Right. Yeah.
But when I was reading about the show and it was like, from St. Albans, I'm like, oh my God, well, yes, I'm definitely for that.
It's like you were right here. Did you? I'm sure you did theater. Did you do any sports in school?
Well, I was on teams, whether I did sports or not.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I ran track and cross country in junior high and high school, and I did little league, and I did midget league basketball because I never was good enough to get on a school team. So, I was in or even the Y team, I think, but it was like midget league, and it was funny because I was always doing that and doing community theater stuff at the same time. And it was all just kind of one big world of extracurricular stuff that my parents had to drive me to all the time. And I had this friend, Paul Clark, who was just like me, was like doing lots of sports stuff and doing lots of theater stuff. He was a much better athlete though. And it came like there was one summer, I don't remember how old we were. We were in Little League still though. And it was the summer when like the summer musical was happening at the same time as baseball was. And
you had to choose.
You were going to have to choose. Like, but I managed to kind of do both and I did everything for a long time. And this was like the summer of reckoning, and you had to choose. I chose sports and I chose theater, and and that was it. He became like the star quarterback and everything else, and I did all the plays and stuff. So
what if you had chosen sports? You'd probably, who knows where you'd be working now.
Or how crippled I would be because I don't know if I was, in most, I was okay in baseball. I was terrible for the first few years. Like everybody in the league was supposed to get 3 innings per game. That was the rule. I don't think I was even getting my 3 innings. I think my dad to make sure that I did. But then like the last year or so, I kind of grew into my coordination. And so that last year, I remember getting on base and knocking in what became the winning run in our, league championship.
There you go.
So, that was my moment of fame.
That's your sports moment.
That's my sports moment. I do think from time to time, especially like in this past year and a half when I've been going through my dad's basement and pulling out boxes and going through closets in my apartment and clearing stuff out because we all had time to do that kind of thing.
That's right.
And I did, it does make you sort of think, wow, I wonder what would have been different if I hadn't done all this stuff. And it all seems inevitable, now. But at the time, there were a lot of those little kind of you
That's
know,
right.
crossroads where you went left or you went right, and you know, who knows what would have been different if you hadn't. You know, I had no strong desire to leave West Virginia when I did leave. I ended up going to school with the encouragement of my parents, who wanted me to get, you know, the best education that I could. But
Yeah.
I was perfectly happy growing up in Huntington, and I don't think I really had considered like how I was going to try to have a career in the arts and be in West Virginia. But I wasn't that kid who was like dying to get out of his small town.
Right. Right.
I was real happy there. I had a, you know, pretty idyllic childhood, and loved it. And you know, who knows what would have been different if I hadn't left. But now I just spend a lot of time thinking of ways to get back.
Yeah, you got to come back. Bring the band through.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we will. I mean, we definitely, you know, as soon as we're able to think about things like that, we'll definitely be back.
Yeah. Yeah, we're pretty tight with the guys at Mountain Stage. My wife ran since you're from the area. She was big with the festival stuff that they
Yeah.
do in Charleston, Taste of Charleston, that stuff, and she did
Uh-huh.
that for years. So we got to know Larry and some of the guys there at Mountain Stage. So yeah, need to get you back out here.
Yeah, I'd love it. I'd love it. I did the West Virginia Squares thing for the festival a couple years ago. It was really
Oh yeah,
That was a blast.
yeah, yeah. I don't know how. I wonder how I missed that one because yeah, I should have I should have grabbed onto that.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, I'm still learning, and it's always great when you find fellow West Virginians, and we're everywhere. It's just
Yeah.
a lot of times nobody knows.
Yeah. You know, it's the crypto West Virginians.
That's right. Let me ask you this. This will prove your West Virginia bona fides. Did you vacation at Myrtle Beach?
We we I don't remember if we ever did. I remember we did a lot at Virginia Beach,
Oh
and
yeah, Virginia Beach. That counts as well.
we did a lot at Virginia Beach, and we would camp at Assateague Island, which was kind of um, so yeah. But we
Yeah, you
definitely
know the area a little bit.
we made the summer, you know, pilgrimage to those beaches.
Well, so normally I'd start out by asking you this question. I got us off track, but you know, what made you want to get into the entertainment business? You know, how did that come about?
Well, my dad and mom met at Juilliard, and
Yeah,
he was a music professor, a music student, a piano student, and she was a modern dance student. And so when when they got married, and my dad went on to get his his master's at Catholic University, I guess, and then his doctorate at WVU.
yeah,
Um, so and Huntington Marshall was his second teaching job, his second college teaching job. So I was around it all the time. I mean, I would go to
yeah.
sleep with him playing piano at night and practicing, um, and we were often kind of, my brother and sister and I were kind of called in to be unpaid labor in family productions and stuff.
Yeah.
And then my dad would be music directing things at the community players in Huntington, or some in Prestonsburg, Kentucky at the Jenny Wiley Summer Music Theater. So the whole family would kind of decamp to Eastern Kentucky and spend the summer doing summer stock theater and stuff. So I grew up just doing it. It was just the
Right.
arts part of my growing up. Um, and my parents absolutely encouraged us and supported us in doing that, but they weren't in any way sort of trying to steer us to that, because they knew how difficult a life it was.
Sure.
So they really encouraged us to go to school and get well-rounded educations, which I did. But I think maybe they were hoping we would end up being doctors and lawyers and stuff. But went into ballet, and she danced with New York City Ballet for a number of years. And my brother's an actor also and lives in New
Yeah.
York. So they and I think they're delighted. They were worried when we were young and scrambling and trying
Well,
to,
that's right.
like any parents are. Um, but yeah, so I just kind of grew up surrounded by it. And it did take me a long time to decide. And I went to college. I just decided not to do like a conservatory kind of program because I wanted to get a full education. And I explored lots of other things and things I was interested in my studies, but I just kept kind of coming back to acting and music. And I figured by the end of college, I figured, well, I guess I'll just go to New York and I'll just see. And if it doesn't seem to be working out, then I'll go back and I'll pursue one of the other things that I found interesting in school. But and I just kind of managed to sort of limp along enough. You spend a lot of time in your first years in New York waiting tables and trying to
Right.
get a chance to do the things that you really want to do. Um, and every time I thought every job was my last job, I thought, and but I would always manage to get just enough encouragement to not throw in the towel, and eventually, those things kind of uh, rolled together into something bigger and somewhat somewhat reliable. Although I still think every job is probably my last job.
Yeah. I think that's just an actor's mindset.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. Yeah. You have done all of the plays. Like I think you have been like you're so versatile. You have been in all of them.
Or schizophrenic. It's because I think I guess I just sort of I never learned that there had to be sort of boundaries between genres and uh, between industries, between media. So I just sort of thought, well, why can't you do Shakespeare plays and musicals, and why can't you be in TV shows and on stage and have a band and all this stuff? Part of that comes from my dad, who um, his the period in music and art that he has always really been fascinated by is the early early 20th century, and artists like Eric Satie and people who were kind of doing art and visual art and dance and theater and opera and music
Right.
all rolled together. So I kind of grew up with this idea that artistic expression just has a lot of different versions and different faces, but it's all part of the same thing, and you can do all of them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I mean, did you ever think when you were working at the movie theaters that you would, you know, end up becoming like a Tony Award winning actor, stage actor? That's amazing.
I don't think I ever had that thought. I mean, I remember watching the Tony Awards with my family, at in our living room in Huntington, and I enjoyed them, and I watched them every year. I think we all did, but I don't remember ever thinking, "Yeah, I'm going to be there one day."
Yeah.
And I think partly because at that time I didn't really do musicals. I didn't. I went to them, and I was in summer stock stuff in the chorus, but
Right.
I thought I was going to be like a serious dramatic actor. That was kind of what I was more interested in. And it seemed to me that watching the Tony Awards, the only way you got to be at the Tony Awards was if you were in musicals or you were British. That was like, and since I wasn't either of those things, I didn't really think that was necessarily going to be for me. I thought I was going to have a career in regional theater doing plays and stuff. Um, I mean, if I thought about it at all, mostly I just sort of wanted to do interesting stuff, and
Yeah.
later I want to do interesting stuff and still be able to eat and pay my rent. Um, and that's kind of fundamentally been my approach to my career in general. It's just like find something interesting to do, find something that scares you a little bit. If you have
Yeah.
an opportunity to do something that you're afraid you might fail at, that's probably the thing you should try to do. And every time I would get to the top of one of those little mountains, I would look for the next mountain to climb. Maybe maybe that's the West Virginia in me. Um, so like once I had the Tony nomination, the first one for Tommy,
Yeah.
the logical thing would be, well, look for your next Broadway show. But what I did was leave that show after 2 years and go continue to do it in Germany in the first European company and live in Germany for a year and a half. And that's not necessarily the most logical,
Right. That's not a straight line.
no. It's funny. It's funny you say that because when I look back at my career, I can absolutely draw a line from one thing to the other and show you how I got to this thing from that. But looking at it from the front end, it never made any sense,
Yeah.
this is I made. But
Where did you live at in Germany?
it was in Frankfurt, well, Offenbach, right outside Frankfurt.
Yeah, my brother just got back. He worked or works for the NSA, and he's over there for 3 years in Wiesbaden, which I think
Oh,
is
yeah.
close to Frankfurt.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's very close there. Yeah.
yeah. So he just got
Germany
home.
Germany was a real surprise to me. I don't know, what I expected, but it's such a lush and green country,
Yeah.
and the people are so, big-hearted and friendly. They sound like they're angry at you all the time, but that's just the sound of German. But
I've actually heard of from my brother and from others that it reminds them a little bit of West Virginia in
yeah,
some
yeah,
locations.
it absolutely does.
Yeah, that's pretty good. So you played. Now I was a fan back then, but I'm pretty sure that your guy on Fame was British,
Hmm.
right?
Yep, Ian Ware.
Yeah, Ian. Yeah, I remember that because you played an Ian on General Hospital because my mother used to watch General Hospital, and I always ask her. I was like, "Hey, mom, I'm talking to this person today. Do you know who that is?" And she's like, "Hmm." And so I was telling her some stuff you're in, and she's like, "I think he was on General Hospital." I was like, "He was," but that's what she said. She said it was Ian.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's right. I was on my early days when I first got to New York. I was in the background of just about every soap opera in New York, and some out in LA too. But that was my on-camera training in a lot of ways because
Yeah.
Yale didn't have any training in on-camera stuff. So I would get these jobs and eat hamburgers in the background of the teen disco, and just be like keeping my eye on the real actors and seeing like how they hit marks and how they knew which camera was on and all that stuff. And it was a kind of a paid graduate school. Not
I had read, and you tell me if I'm wrong, but I had read where that character in Fame kind of helped you with the music side of things.
Well, it did in a funny roundabout way because like I'd grown up having bands and playing
Yeah.
music, and my dad had wanted all of us kids to study the instrument of our choice for a year, and then if we didn't want to continue it after that, we didn't have to. So I started out on violin, and but it was fourth grade, and playing violin wasn't nearly as cool as playing guitar. So I wish I'd stuck to violin because I'd love
Yeah,
to be able to
it'd be
play
cool now.
that. But so then I switched to guitar, and I kind of finished out my year, and then I just put it away because I was doing a bunch of other stuff. And then I guess when I was around 13, probably, I picked it up again and kind of retaught myself and started a band in junior high with my friends. And so I had played music as long as I'd been acting, really, but I never really kind of pursued it because I had such an idea of what a musician was from the example of my father, who's devoted his whole life to it, and knew theory and could read music and all that. And I was really just mostly self-taught.
Yeah.
Um, so it was a thing I did for me and a thing that I'd love to do. And even during Tommy, I had a band and stuff, but but when I went to LA, I mean, it was part of why I got the job, I think, because they wanted you to come in and sing a rock song for the audition. And I was like, well, I'm not going to like just have some guy play it for me. So I'm going to come in and play my guitar and play a David Bowie song. So I played Young Americans for the audition and got the job. And then, so then I'm out in LA and I'm going to concerts, which I had always done. I've been a music fan forever.
Yeah.
So I would go, and this was when like I saw one of Jane's Addiction's first shows
Oh
in
wow.
downtown LA, and this was when Guns N' Roses was just getting started,
Yeah.
and there was a whole big like goth scene in LA at the time too. So I would go out and see all these shows, and because of the way Fame was in like reruns at that time, or was in syndication, so it would be on the new episode would be uh, on Saturday night, and then there was a rerun on Sunday evening, and they
Yeah.
were on at sort of the perfect times for all the club kids. When they were getting ready to go out on Saturday night, they would have it on in the background, and then when they were like finally getting up and going about their day again on Sunday, it would be on again. So I would go see these bands and go to these clubs, and I would get recognized by people because they'd seen the show while they were getting ready to go out,
That's pretty
and
awesome.
because in LA you sort of are what you appear to be. So
Right.
I happened to be this English guitar student, and so I was kind of like given access and sort of welcomed into that world in a way I might not have
Wow.
been otherwise, and I got to know people who were playing music, and I found myself thinking, well, I know I'm not a better guitar player than this guy, uh, but I'm kind of as good as he is, I guess, um, and he's got like a 5 record deal, so maybe I should
Right.
actually finish some songs that I write, and maybe I should actually put bands together and do it more. So I started taking my own songwriting more seriously
Yeah.
then, and that also did an interesting thing. It took some of the pressure off acting jobs, because now one of the most frustrating things as an actor is you spend so much time just waiting around for the opportunity to be creative, because you depend on other people to kind of do it, unless you're John Cameron Mitchell and you just write Hedwig for yourself. um, but so I now, once I started playing guitar more and started writing songs and stuff, I had something to do to be creative
Yeah.
for the time periods when I was just waiting for an acting job to come around. So that just it took a lot of the pressure off the auditions. I think I probably started auditioning better, because I was sort of like, well, I'd love to have this job, but if I don't get it, I'll just go write some more songs and just and I think it made a lot of my life a lot easier.
Yeah. How tough? Acting, singing, terrible. How you made it?
Yeah, I mean, I, how I've managed to be a musician whose day job is acting, I don't know.
Yeah.
You know,
So I told you I've been a fan for a long time, and it started with Fame, but I saw you in a whole bunch of stuff back then. So I want to throw a few at you, because I doubt that this gets brought up too much with you. So the first one is Equalizer,
yeah, yeah.
and you played like two different people on there.
Yes, I'm proud to say that I died on the Equalizer and came back as somebody else a different season. That kind of thing doesn't happen too much anymore, I don't think. But
I used to watch that one with my mom. She loved and that one it's a older gentleman that's the Equalizer in that one.
yeah. Edward Woodward was his name.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you did an episode of 21 Jump Street.
I did a couple of them actually. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I knew I remembered one.
Yeah. It was I was in the when they kind of when Johnny Depp left, and it continued on for another year or so, and there was sort of like the new class, 21 Jump Street, the new class. And so I was the boyfriend of the girl who was like the new to the force girl.
Yeah.
And it was supposed to have kind of carried on for a while, and it just didn't. But yeah. Well, I don't get asked about that too often.
No, I didn't figure you did. So then, of course, you've done so many cool roles, because you've got to be a Marvel villain, a DC villain, a villain on the tick, and then you had Fringe. I mean, for a geeky guy, that's like I don't know. It's like jackpot.
I know. Well, and I feel that being a geeky guy myself, because I grew up with Marvel comics and I read DC comics, but I was more of a Marvel kid, generally
Yeah.
growing up. But I've always
Yeah,
been
me
a
too.
comics fan and a horror film fan too. I used to
Yeah.
get Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine all the time, and
Oh yeah, me too. Love that magazine.
yeah.
You're old enough to remember in this area on Halloween night they would show those old '50s Universal monster movies all night long.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
I'd look forward to that every year growing up because I was allowed to stay up and
yeah.
until I passed
Killer
out watching
Killer Theater.
Killer Theater. Yeah.
I was telling somebody this story the other day. I used to when I got old enough that my parents would let me stay up past the time that they were going to go to bed. Um, and it was usually on, like, I guess it was Friday night or Saturday night. And always, like, the best, they would show like three of those movies in a row that night. And the best one was always the last one, of course. And so
Yeah.
I would be staying up, and I was I wasn't all that old, so I was dead tired probably
That's
midway
right.
through the second movie, and I would run up to the bathroom at commercial breaks and, like, throw cold water on my face to stay awake for the really scary last movie.
Yeah, those were the best times. I miss those times.
Yeah,
Did you ever go to see Rocky Horror when you
I
were
did.
growing
We
up?
had it. It was a Saturday, the midnight movie when I
Yep.
was working at the movie theater. So all the ushers used to. That was probably the first time I ever was in drag. Was the ushers would all dress up in they borrowed dresses from the concession girls, and the
Yeah.
concession girls would all dress up in men's clothes and stuff, and we would go.
Oh, that's
We
great.
would either work the movie or we'd go see it.
Yeah, every Saturday night.
Yeah.
You see that? That's great. So did you know that? Let me back up a little bit. So I put myself through Marshall. I owned a couple of comic book stores, and so there, at that time, where the Campus Christian Center was, across the street there was a typewriter store,
Yeah.
and I had a comic book store in the bottom of that typewriter store. Now they've turned it into part of Marshall now, but back
Right.
then, and I had another one once I graduated Marshall up at Hurricane. Um,
Okay.
but anyway, so I'm a big comic book guy.
When
So
when would that one have been in Huntington?
this would have been, let's see, I went to college in '88, so it would have been like '88 to '92 around that time. It's called Street Corner Comics.
Okay, that was a little after I was there, I guess.
Yeah, you probably had like Comic World when you were there because they've
Yeah,
been down there forever.
yeah, I can remember that.
Yeah. They were down there for forever. But
Yeah.
I wondered when you got offered or went out for the role in Ant-Man, did they tell you it was Egghead or did they give you his name? I mean, did you know it was Egghead?
No, they didn't tell me anything. They didn't tell me the character's name. I had auditioned for a couple of different Marvel things in the year or two before that,
Yeah,
and didn't ended up not getting any of them. But I guess I was kind of on their
on the radar.
radar.
Yeah,
And so this one was just a phone call because I guess they'd seen me enough tape of me being various people.
yeah.
Um, so they just called my agents and said, we've got this role in Ant-Man and Wasp. Um, we can't tell you what the character. We can't show you a script. We can't tell you what the character. Can't tell you his name. But do you want to do it? And so I said, yeah, of course, whatever it is. And it may have possibly been because right before that, I auditioned for oh, I can't remember the character. I can't remember which one it was, but it was one of the kind of motion capture characters where
Yeah,
you were going to do it, but it was not going to look like you. It was all going to be CGI.
right.
And a number of times they said, now, are you sure that you're okay, that it's not going to look like you, that you wouldn't really be recognizable? And I just kept saying, no, I think that's really awesome. So I think they figured I was game for, for whatever. So,
Yeah.
um, but my agents and I, kind of went back through the comics to sort of figure out, well, who could it possibly be? And we're trying to figure out, and and I can't remember. I think it was one of my agents who figured out. I wonder if it's Egghead, and
Yeah.
and that's exactly who it turned out to be. When I
That's,
got there, they finally gave me the script, but they never. He's never referred to in any of the scripts or anything as Egghead. It's just people, people who know the comics know that out of that explosion he becomes Egghead. So
yeah.
I'm crossing my fingers that one day they're gonna, the way
They
they
got to
do.
bring you back in. They have to.
Yeah.
You see, if you stopped right now, you didn't do anything else, you could just show up at conventions in costume as Egghead, Professor Pig, Ramses. You could do any of those. You'd have a whole uh, streamed income coming in. You wouldn't even need to do anything else.
Well, I may have to turn to that anytime now.
I always joke with my wife that if I ever had a role like that, and I couldn't act a lick, but if I had a role like that, I'd only need the one because that's all I do. They wouldn't even have to invite me. I'd just be showing up at the
Just
convention.
show up.
Ah, there's that egghead again. Yeah, great,
He
egghead's
looks
here.
just like the real guy. Well, when I went to I went to Dragon Con for Fringe. Yeah, for Fringe. That was the
Yeah,
first con I ever went to in Atlanta. But then for Tick, they took us all out there to kind of before the Tick aired. They took us all out and did a big thing at San Diego Comic Con. Um, so I got to go for my first time to Comic Con in the best possible way, with a team there and people who like could take you around and get you to places
right.
because it's overwhelming, man.
Yeah,
But I got there the afternoon before. I just went out because I had credentials, so I could go, all kinds of places. So I just went like a fan the first day and just wandered around on the floor, and it
that's
was
great.
just the coolest thing. And being able to go to where all the artists are, and they're like drawing
Yeah,
right in front of you, and like I'm seeing heroes of mine, or the guys that they taught and stuff. It was just the coolest thing to me.
yeah, that's pretty awesome. I always said like when I had the stores, I do a lot of conventions. I travel around and have a table or a booth or whatever. But back then, it was only about the writers and the artists.
Hmm.
There was nothing else. There was no cosplay. There was no
Yeah.
actors, TV, anything. It was just about the writers and artists. So I got fairly close with a lot of those guys. So
Wow.
now when it's me and my son, we're going around to the conventions and stuff, and they're so much better now because it's so big. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just and there's back then there was no females going to conventions,
Right.
but
Yeah.
now especially with cosplaying, it's opened up to everybody.
Yeah.
But I still kind of move over to those guys that they were my heroes growing up.
Yeah.
Those guys writing the stories and stuff.
Yeah. I gotta say, when I got the job on Gotham, and I wanted to go back and get some of the early comics that
Yeah,
when Big showed up. So I went into the comic store for the first time in quite a while. I mean, I'll drop in from time to time and get some graphic novels or get some
yeah,
collections and stuff, and um, but I don't read them like I used to when I was a kid. And I hadn't been in a comic store for a while, and this was one in New York. And I I remember having this kind of like epiphany moment because I think comic stores are maybe the most uh, um, open and
yeah,
embracing
yeah,
places on earth because you've got every kind of person in there. You've got every kind of age, every kind of ethnicity, men, women. It's become the place where people who don't feel like they fit in a lot of other
that's
places
right.
all fit in together, in that place. And it's, the conventions are an extension of that, but it
Yeah,
kind of feel like it began in the comic book store. And it's such a beautiful place. And I saw like, fathers bringing their little kids and
Yeah.
mothers bringing their little daughters to find the comic book that was going to be their comic book to follow and stuff. Um, and I just saw every kind of person in there, and I just thought this is the way the whole planet should be.
Yeah. I've always thought that the best night or the best night of the week, Wednesdays, was comic book day. Wednesday comic books come in, and
Yeah.
and people would, you had as a store owner, you had to separate them and make sure you had everything before you could start selling them, and then you had to, you pull for your regular customers and that type of stuff.
Right.
But it would just be jam packed with people, and they were all very patient. They were just there to hang out and talk comic books, and they didn't care how long they had to wait to actually buy the books that you were getting in.
Yeah, that
Great.
was only part of the experience. Just being
Yeah.
together and talking about stuff was a lot of it.
Yeah, it was so good. So
Yeah.
tell me about. I have to ask about Fringe. How did that come about, and what did you think about? It was such a weird role.
Well, it started off as just another audition, and I got called and given a sides to go in to audition for a
Right.
show that nobody knew anything about. And the funny thing in hindsight was, because they needed to give you a scene to read, to do something with, to see who they wanted to hire for the job. So it was a scene that was just, it was either a scene that they ended up cutting, or it was a scene that they just wrote just for the audition.
Right.
um, with September is like on an operating table, but he's awake, and they're opening him up and they're talking to him, and they're discovering that he's got two of everything. He's got like two hearts, two sets of lungs, and it's obviously like they were thinking of the dual universes kind of thing
Right.
already. Um, but so I just, I went in. It was like another weird, like, well, I don't know what this thing's going to be, but I'll do it. It seems kind of cool. And then I got the job. And almost as soon as I was offered the job, I got a call from the producers saying, so we have this idea that we want to run by you, and see, how you'd feel about it. We're thinking of having this character show up in every episode, but just for like a blip. And the initial idea was to do that for the whole first season. You'd
Right.
only see him in the little little moments, and they said if we do it right, we'll have the whole country like dying to know who this character is and what's happening, and you'll be on the cover of Entertainment Weekly. Who is the observer? What is this? And so and I said that sounds awesome. Sign me
Yeah.
up. And they ended up, I guess Fox liked the character so much and said, we don't want to wait till the end of the first season to bring him in more. So it ended up being, they moved him to like the fourth episode, the arrival. But I loved it. I loved I loved being an Easter egg, and I loved being this kind of mysterious character. And it was really fun in the beginning. My first costume fitting, I remember sitting with a costume designer, and she said, okay, so what do you see him wearing? I'm like, I thought that was kind of your job. I don't know. And they said, well, JJ kind of gave us some guidelines, but he gave us a lot of flexibility. And his main instruction was he needs to kind of seem like he could be from any time, and like he could just blend in with a crowd completely. But we
Yeah.
also need to be able to, recognize him and track him and stuff. So the idea of having no eyebrows and no hair wasn't mentioned at all through the whole beginning period. And so I went through this rack of suits, and the designer and I picked out a suit that I liked. Thank God I liked it, because I was going to wear it for 5 years.
Yeah.
And then she said, I guess we should have you have like an overcoat or something, because we'll be filming in winter and stuff. So we should do that. And she said, and maybe a hat, sometimes, let's look at these hats. And there was just a row of hats, and I tried on a bunch of hats, and I picked out the fedora. And,
Yeah.
it's so cool thinking back to that time, because that look became such an iconic
Oh yeah.
look for that character. And but my first day of shooting, I was in the it's it's actually the second episode, I guess, in the hospital when I think the like old man baby thing, was brought into the
Yep.
and I'm just kind of behind the nurses station. And so I was showing up for work that first day and sat in the makeup chair and they said, okay, so JJ wants you to not have any eyebrows. How do you feel about that? And I said, well, I feel fine about it, but I really don't want to shave my eyebrows. And
Yeah.
they said, yeah, that's, fair enough. So they kind of, MacGyvered a solution with like patting down my eyebrows and covering them up with stuff because they hadn't been prepared to do it. And then
Right.
once that was decided, then they went back in and they, made prosthetic pieces and all that stuff, which they did from a little more behind the scenes stuff. I had done Cirque Du Freak, the
Yes.
movie.
Yep.
So they had out in LA, they had a mold of my from shoulders up that they had used to make prosthetics for that movie. And the cool thing about that experience for me was that it was the shop that had they had done well, they had done Eddie Murphy's all of the different Eddie Murphys in what was that, Nutty Professor or whatever. But they had also done like Alien, and they'd done all these other things, and they were big famous Monsters of Filmland fans, and
Wow.
one of them I think had trained with Ray Harryhausen and stuff. So
Yeah.
I thought, all that was thrilling. So they didn't have time to make a mold of my eyebrows, but they realized that there was a mold of my eyebrows out in LA. So they just had somebody make a mold of that and then send it to New York. They made the eye coverings from that. So it was all
that's a pretty good behind the scenes connection. That's pretty. Yeah. I could have done the Observer thing. I don't have much going on up there. I could have shaved the rest of that.
Just just a little Harry's razor.
They wouldn't want me talking, but I could have been one just standing around in the background.
Yeah, that's how I spent 90% of my time on that show.
Yeah. So. Why does that Observer look so confused? What's wrong with it? I'd be the one that's lost all the time.
It was amazing after the first year of being the only Observer, and then suddenly they brought August and these other guys in.
Yeah.
They gave them a DVD of me as the Observer, as the this is how to observe, because I over the course of that first year I sort of developed kind of physical mannerisms and stuff,
right,
speaking and stuff that were really kind of mostly just me and sometimes the director kind of giving me some guidance and stuff, but I was given a lot of room to kind of come up with a lot of that stuff. And I've told this story before, but the Observer kind of head tilt thing was really mostly from watching my dog Gibson, who when she was trying to figure out what I'm saying and looking for a word that meant food or going outside. And
yeah, well, that became kind of iconic, that little head tilt.
Yeah,
I know you've had such a fun career. I mean, you've hit all the cool stuff. You've done a bunch of other stuff. You've done the serious acting. Then you've got this whole other career on the stage, and that doesn't even count the music stuff.
Yeah, I just I don't feel like I'm a big overachiever kind of person. I just like doing
you might
stuff.
Be though.
I'm the least ambitious, incredibly busy person that I know.
Were you a Tick fan? The comic book Tick?
I remember the comic book, and I remember the Saturday morning cartoon and stuff.
Yeah.
I wasn't like a crazy rabid fan of it, but I was aware of it.
I'm familiar with it. Yeah.
Yeah. It kind of came out in a sort of period after my big comic book years and before I kind of got into graphic novels again, so it's kind of in that in between.
We've switched now, because when I owned the stores, it was all about the collecting, so I was as a collector. But now it's really about just wanting to read the stories. So we're big into the trade paperbacks, because that way you don't have to wait. You just get the whole series, one thing.
It's basically like binging.
It is. That's exactly what it's like.
Yeah.
And some of those, we're going back and reading. What a great time to be a comic book fan. But
oh man, yeah,
you've got The Boys and Invincible and just so many different these shows, and we're going back and kind of reading those stories.
Yeah, and it's fun. It's fun now that the worlds can comment on themselves. They can, like The Tick is a great sort of meta look at the whole idea of superheroes, and
it is. It was that series was well done. They did a good job with that series.
Yeah, I was so disappointed that they stopped after just.
Me too.
Yeah, it was a real shame.
Come on.
No, there was talk when I was killed off in the first season. They said, we're trying to figure out ways to bring you back. That's one of the great things about being in comics. Yes. It's like when I died in Gotham, they were like, yeah, well, don't count on it, because
you kind of did
in the pool and you come back. It's easy. But there's a whole idea that I would come back, because I was like burnt to a crisp at the end of that first season. I would come back and because of my whole Egyptian fascination, that I would come back in all these bandages and stuff, and everybody else would think I was trying to be the mummy, but I would be like, no, I'm just waiting for the wounds to heal.
Oh, it'd been great. Did they let you keep any of these costumes or the suit from Fringe?
You want to know if I have the gold velour tracksuit from Fringe, from Tick? No, I don't. They keep that stuff because they don't know if they ever do come back to it, and they want to have that stuff, or
because I'd be lounging around the house in that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That was the most comfortable thing I ever wore. Not necessarily the most flattering, but certainly the most comfortable.
Yeah. Well, Mike, thank you so much. I would keep you all night, but I won't do that. You're gonna have to come back. We got so much more to talk about.
Yeah, well, come back anytime.
Yeah, We now I know you're from around here, so if you're ever coming through, you got to holler. You got to give a shout.
I will. Yeah.
I always so I did an interview with a British actress that had a role in the Black Widow film. Oh, wow. So we were attempting to do each other's accents. I was trying to do British, she was trying to do West Virginia. So I was trying to coach her. I told her, we don't sit on the floor, we sit in the floor. So I was trying to give her stuff like that. Right. So did you have any of that growing up? Did you pick up any of the, can you do the West Virginia accent?
Yeah. I mean, when I came home from being away at school for the first time, and I was up in the Northeast, and I remember taking the train into DC, and then I was I guess I was flying, and then the next flight was going to be from there to Charleston or Huntington, and all of a sudden, everybody in the waiting room suddenly had an accent, and because they were all like going back to West Virginia, but I'd never thought of there being an accent really before. Right. It was just like how everybody sounded, and I didn't hear it at home so much because my dad and mom weren't from there.
Right.
And I used to try to worry them by putting on even more of an accent, just that they were losing their child. But I definitely had a bit of an accent when I went away to school, and I just I never specifically tried to get rid of it or anything. It just sort of disappeared more or less. It'll come out when I'm tired, or when I'm home, it comes out more.
When you're talking to somebody else with the accent, come out.
Yeah. And then there are some things like Route 64, and they're just words and phrases and stuff that I like. What? Yeah.
Well, and hurricane.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that's purely West Virginian.
Yeah. Well, I went to Hunt and East Hasku. It's
That
like, I
was
know
good.
there are more syllables, but that's what the cheerleader said. Hunt and
Yeah.
East Hasku. And the funny thing is, I'm always wanting to play a character from West Virginia, or a character from
Yeah.
near where I grew up, and I never get to. I don't, I play all kinds of. I've done all kinds of weird accents, British accent for fame and stuff, but I keep trying to convince people like, no,
You need to write it.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
you need to write the script.
yeah. Yeah, I keep trying to. I know Scott McClanahan, that writer from
Yeah. Yeah.
wrote Crapalachia, and I know he's been working on a series for a while, and I keep,
Ooh.
bothering him and saying, got anything for me?
Well, we've had a few like Bo Smith,
Hmm.
did Winona Earp.
Yeah,
That it was writing the comic, got that, and then we've got the McElroys that
yeah, yeah,
the D&D stuff. They've got the podcast and that stuff that's going to be a show. There's some maybe there'll be a chance
yeah.
we
I'm
get something for you. So Mike, before you go, what's the name of your band?
Loose Cattle.
Loose Cattle. I knew it was Cattle song. I've been listening to the whole family's been listening to your music for like a week. So,
Oh,
just playing it. We're just playing all the time because I'm trying to get.
for not doing the dishes or something. Or?
Hey, this is the best thing I can say about your music is the grandkids love it. Put your stuff on, they're dancing. They range from, a year to 2 years and they're bopping around. So that's pretty good.
That's our target demographic, and
Yeah, that's what I thought.
it bodes well because you get them, make them fans at that age, and then they just keep buying your records
Yeah.
once they
You
actually have an allowance.
you've got a really, really good voice. I
Oh,
mean,
thanks.
and you got some range, but you kind of cross genres with it. I was listening, and your music, it doesn't just stick to just one genre. You kind of
No,
hit a bunch of them.
I think even more, since now I spend a lot of time down in New Orleans, and the band's really based down there, and
Right.
so many different kinds of music that kind of all cross pollinate down there. So I think even more in recent years, I used to play a lot of rock and roll, and a lot of, I
Yeah.
played guitar for Bob Mould. So I did a lot of big, loud guitar music for a long time.
Yeah.
And then went through a much more kind of acoustic phase for a long time. And now I'm kind of coming out of that a little bit and wanting to write more electric music and stuff. And the band is kind of feeling like exploring different stuff too. So this
Yeah.
last record we did it all fits, I guess, under the Americana banner, but
Right.
there's a lot in that, and we're writing a lot of music now too. But yeah, I think we're kind of finding our voice, and it's not just one thing. I love that, radio in the '70s and stuff. You would hear Leonard Skinnerd and the
Yeah.
Carpenters, and Bread, and Sly and the Family Stone, all in the half hour.
Yeah. Yeah. That's absolutely true. Now it's all it's segmented. Every station has kind of their own sound, but back then, yeah, everything was played. You
Yeah,
hear all of it.
yeah.
Now, I'm glad you brought that up because my wife loves New Orleans and she loved you in Treme. So she said, make sure you tell me about Treme because we watched that one together. She's very artsy and musical. And yeah, she was all about that. Plus,
Yeah.
now, remind me, was it the gentleman that did The Wire that wrote Treme?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. It was so well written.
Yeah, David Simon and
David Simon, yeah. Yeah. And I didn't realize that your band was located there.
Yeah.
Is that how you got cast in Treme, or was that just a coincidence?
I went down to New Orleans first to do Cirque Du Freak, that film.
Oh, right.
And then I made all these great friends down there and started coming back as much as I could, and eventually kind of scraped together enough to get a place down there. And so I was already there when Treme started. And it was such a big deal down there, and people were so excited about it. And I kept telling anybody who would listen, and a lot of people who wouldn't, that, I just want to do anything just to be a part of it. I'll be a waiter in a scene. I don't care. I just want to be a part of things. And I got introduced to Eric Overmyer, the other
Yeah.
creator. And we were having lunch, and I was trying to figure out how can I subtly, without seeming too obvious, kind of suggest, that if they ever had a part or whatever. And before I could even get to that, he said, "Would you ever want to do something on the show?" And I was like, "Yeah, whatever." He said, "Well, you have this character that we're going to introduce next season who's a music manager, and he's kind of based a little bit on some real life people, um, but if you'd be interested, that would be great." And I was thrilled, but I was also like, "Oh man, I so want to be a part of this, but I'm going to play like the one character that's the villain in any musician."
That's right.
It turned out he ends up being kind of a decent guy. I mean, he's trying to do what the artist said she wanted, and it's where the artistry and commerce kind of conflict. But I was so happy to be a part of it, and so thrilled. And it kind of just, I mean, my connection to New Orleans was already set before that, but it cemented it.
Well, it's such a beautiful show, and the music's just amazing. It's well written. The dialogue's really good in it. It's just
and there's so many real musicians in it playing themselves, and a lot of whom, and this was part of their intention, I think, was to try to capture some of these men and women before they were gone. And already a lot of them, are gone. And in a lot of ways, like that New Orleans is already kind of slipping away a bit. It's, it's progress, and things change, and people move in and move out and stuff. But it's so perfectly, authentically captures that town at that moment.
I know, it's just a wonderful show. Well, if you're ever on Bourbon Street, my college roommate is the police sergeant for Bourbon Street down there. So
it's good to know policemen.
We went down a few times and got the tour, the police tour. So Mike, before you go, anything that you have upcoming that we can keep an eye out for?
Well, in February, I think, this new HBO series called The Gilded Age.
I'm excited to watch that one. What a cast! Yeah,
it's amazing, and I think for fans of Downton Abbey, they're going to be real thrilled, and I think people, who think, Downton Abbey, I don't know if it's, maybe a little too stuffy or something for me. I think they'll find stuff that will surprise them, because it's about America in 1882, and in a lot of ways, it's about so many things that are where the seeds were planted for stuff that we're confronting today. It was the beginning of the industrial age. It was the beginning of the disparity between the haves and the have-nots, and progressive movements, women's movements, and it was not too long after the Civil War. So race figures in a big way as well. But it's also just got those great, upstairs, downstairs, behind the scenes, butler intrigue stuff, and it looks beautiful. And I think it's going to be a really great show. So that comes out in February, and I play Watson, valet in that. And then I just finished filming this movie called Basic Psych here in Pittsburgh. It's a little indie thriller that will now, go the way of all indies and try to find its way around the festival circuit and stuff. So we'll see what happens with that. And there's always new loose cattle right there.
Oh yeah, we've been listening. It's so good. You could drop all this acting stuff. Just sing.
I if I thought I could make a living doing it, I probably would, because I really love playing music. It's really something.
Do you play piano as well?
No, I mean, for 5 minutes, I might be able to fool you into thinking that I kind of could, but then you would pretty quickly realize that not really.
All right, last thing. Where can we find you on social media?
I'm on Instagram at Michael Cerveris, I think. Uh, the avatar is a cow jumping in the air, whatever that is. Loose Cattle is also on Instagram. I mean, I'm on all the things. I'm on Facebook and Instagram, and I don't use Twitter all that much anymore, but I'm on there too. And Loose Cattle is in all those places also. And we have a loosecattleband.com, and yeah,
Yeah, I was
not,
checking some of that out.
yeah.
You're actually not too difficult to find. That's
No, I'm kind of, and I go through periods. Sometimes I'll be real active and responsive, and then other times I'm just like,
that's like all of us.
yeah,
Sometimes you need a break.
yeah, exactly.
well, Mike, thank you so much. This is
Oh,
been a real
thanks. I had a
pleasure.
great time.
Yeah, I'm just so thrilled that you're from this area.
I'm thrilled. I'm from that area too.
Yeah.
It's a great place to be from and to
It was
be.
a great place to grow up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. All right, hold on one second. I'll hit pause. Michael Cerveris. Oh my gosh, I don't even know what to say. I'm so excited to talk with him. What a talent, and I don't know, because I pride myself on knowing this type of stuff. I'm usually full of useless knowledge. I had no idea he was from West Virginia. I'm so embarrassed about that. But when I was doing my research, first thing that comes up is from West Virginia, and I can't tell you how wonderful that was. Such a great guy and so talented. I mean, if I may have the numbers wrong, but I think he has been nominated for 6 Tonys. He's won 2 of them. He got to play John Wilkes Booth. I didn't get to talk to him about that in the play Assassins, and won a Tony for that. Just amazing. You know, I've watched him on so many shows, movies. You know, he was in the movie The Mexican with Julia Roberts and Brad Pitt. He's been on so many wonderful TV shows, and we talked about a few of them. But he's just very, very prolific, and his music is so good. It some of the songs reminded me of almost like a Johnny Cash type of tune. It's definitely Americana, but he's got just a wonderful voice. So do yourself a favor, track down Loose Cattle, take a listen, go to YouTube, watch some of his stuff on there. He's just really, really talented, and we're going to claim him as a West Virginian. We're claiming him. I know, or I believe he was born in Maryland, but grew up here, so we'll claim him. Just probably one of my favorite interviews. Really enjoyed that. Such a good guy. Extremely intelligent. Yale graduate with honors. His parents were from Juilliard. I mean, just amazing, talented family. His brother is an actor. It's really talented, and I think I heard him say his sister used to be a professional ballet. Just amazing. And I don't want to belabor the point, but anytime we can point to somebody, we're a smaller state, a poor state, and when we can point to somebody that's successful, talented, doing well, it definitely helps West Virginia as a whole. So thank you so much for tuning in. Again, this week, you definitely don't have to do that, but you do. And I'm so grateful. I don't take it for granted. I really appreciate it. There's so many things, good things out there that you could spend your time on. So happy that you come here and spend a little bit of it with us. That tells me that we're bringing in interesting people, good interviews, and you're enjoying that. So thank you so much. If you haven't done so yet, you can find us on YouTube under MeisterCon Pod. Appreciate it if you would subscribe. That would help us out. You can also find all of our audio and video episodes at our website, meistercon.com. I think we're up to like 260 or so episodes. It's a ton. I guarantee you'll find somebody you like, a geeky topic that you enjoy. There's so much there. Please check that out. Thank you guys. Until next time. Bye, everybody.